everybody, welcome back. My name is Sue and I'm a scrap quilter living here in the southeast part of Pennsylvania. And today we're going to talk about Cathedral Windows, which is the quilt hanging behind me. I'm going to give you a little bit of a demo or tutorial on how I build them. But before we get into that, I just kind of wanted to catch everybody up on the last video that I did was where I went to a quilt show and I came home with some fabric from the show. And I wanted to share that I picked out all of the reds that I bought at the show and I washed these before I'm going to put them on my shelves. You never know with reds, some of them hold up really well and some of them bleed a lot. And I'm really glad that I did wash all of these. There are some just from, working with these with fabrics for a long time. Some of them I knew would be fine, and others I was kind of iffy. So I threw them all in just a dishpan and I washed them at the kitchen sink. Because if I put them in the washing machine, I'd have to stand there and look to see if they're going to bleed or not. And I didn't want to use color catchers or waste color catchers at this step of the process. So I washed them at the kitchen sink. And this one, it turns out, bled and bled and bled a lot. It bled so much that even on this fabric, which was next to it in the dishpan, this one turned out very blotchy. So I'm going to wash these two fabrics again. You can see on the back, this is all dye that was released from this fabric. As soon as I started pouring water into the dishpan, the water just turned red right away. So it's just, just a reminder and a little visual aid here of why you should always wash your reds. I'm not perfect. I don't always think to do that, but it's a good habit to get into. No matter what the manufacturer is, no matter how old your fabric is, I would recommend always washing the reds. Other fabrics can bleed also. And they kind of have for me, but it's so rare that the other ones do. Reds are usually the problem. And after I wash these again, whatever I make with these, once I finish the quilt and it gets washed, I will still throw some color catchers in because there could be like just a little bit more dye, that gets released. And I can even see on this one, it might be hard for you to see, but this, the selvage edge down here on this one even turned a little bit pink because of all the dye that was released into the water. So that's where I am with that and most of the other fabrics. I have kind of folded up and sorted and put into the little places where they go in my room, kind of depending on the color and depending on the size and kind of depending the purpose that I think I'm going to use them for. Okay, so I hope you guys really enjoyed the quilt show from the last episode. It was a lot of fun and always really inspirational. I've been really busy because I've been really inspired by that show. So for now, let's get into the cathedral windows and I'll show you how to make one. To start off with, I'll show you where I got the original pattern, the one that I used to make my very first quilt. I got it out of this book here. This was copyrighted in 1983 and this was the page for it here. And in this book, now this was all before pre-cuts and AccuQuilt and all that. The directions for all of these blocks in this book seem kind of primitive. Actually, this one here, I'll turn right here. They give you templates even for a square and a triangle and another square down here. That's what That's what they used to do back in the day. They didn't tell you how big to cut it. They gave you templates. So this is what I started with. It's very kind of rudimentary directions. Their directions say to cut a 6-inch square and then turn under a 1/4 inch seam allowances on all sides, and then mark the center of the square. And then you're gonna basically, I'll show you how to do it then. You're gonna bring all the corners into the center like that. And then you're gonna have new corners, and then you're gonna bring those in too. And that's it basically. So let me get started and I'll show you how to do it. Now on this one here, I marked my 1/4 inch around here. I think when I was making the big quilts that I made, I think I actually cut out of like a cereal box, you know, the cardboard. I think I cut a 1/4 inch strip, and then I would lay it on my fabric and turn this over. This one I just marked. This is not going to show at all, so you don't really have to worry about that. So I marked that, and then I pressed it. This has been sitting for a little bit, so it's kind of coming up again. But and you can sew on your machine along this line, and your seam allowance, don't worry about having a 1/4 inch seam allowance. What you're turning over is a 1/4 inch. But if you want to press this down, or stitch it down so it stays secure, you can all the way around. And then you'll turn your corners over and press it down again. Okay, now what I do, like once it's all pressed down, I found my center point here. So I have a needle and thread. Let me see what kind of knot I have on here. Okay, I like this one better. This one has a bigger knot at the end. And you won't see this knot. It's going to be buried. Okay, I'm going to take my corner here and come up like this. And you can see my knot there. That's going to be on the inside of the quilt. And then I'm going to go directly across to the other side, and I'm going to grab this one. Again, I'll make sure they're turned under. You can see I haven't done anything yet. It's still attached there. Now I'm going to go over to the next one. And you can see now it's going to bring them together. And so I bring them together. You don't want to pull too hard. You want these pieces here just to kiss each other a little bit. And then once they're together, I'm going to take another stitch through, leaving that 1/4 inch turned under, and then another one. And you might want to have a thimble with you. Sometimes now, because you're already adding bulk to it by having things turned under, sometimes it gets pretty difficult to get your needle through. And I don't have a thimble with me, so just bear with me. Okay, so that's your first two that are connected. And then you're going to do the same thing with your next two. So I'm not going to tie a knot. I'm going to leave it like this, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go up to this corner, make sure my edges are turned under, and I'm going to take a bite out of this one with my needle. And that's going to bring that into the center. And then I'm going to do the same thing over here. Get my corners nice, and take a bite out of this one, and then bring that one into the center too. And you can fiddle with these. This is very forgiving. You can really play around with these to get all your corners to come out really nicely. The other thing, while I'm thinking about it, I know when I made mine, it doesn't say this in the book, but when I made mine, I started off with a bolt of fabric, and before I cut out my 6-inch squares, I took a piece at the selvage and I cut a slit and I ripped it straight across, because your fabric is always going to rip on the straight of grain. And once you start folding fabric, it wants to fold on the grain of the fabric. So if you start off with as close to straight of grain as you can possibly get, you're going to have a better finished product at the end. Okay, so that's folding it in now for the first time. So I'll take like another stitch in here just to anchor that really well. And I'm just using hand quilting thread for this. Hand quilting thread is a little bit stronger than just your normal cotton thread. Okay, so now you have a square. I should press this, but I don't have my iron set up right now. So just for your sake at home, I would press this out. And again, you can play with these to make sure your corners are all nice and flat. So once you get it how you want it, press it really good. And this is the part I would make, like if I'm making a whole quilt, I'll go ahead and make easily 100 of these before I even start putting anything in the center. So now you're just going to do the same thing again. You're just going to go again. See, I'm not cutting my thread. And this is going to bring it into the center, and then go to the opposite. And again, you just want them to meet here in the center, and then take a couple of stitches. I really wish I had a thimble. I don't want this to go through my finger. Now these little stitches here, you probably can see them in the finished quilt. So as long as you match them with the background, they should be fine. That's not where your eye is going to focus on those, but you want to hold those together. So now mine are, they're joined from the bottom, and the top ones here are joined to the ones that I folded underneath. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the last two corners. You're always working on opposite corners and bringing them into the center. And once you bring them in, then take a few more stitches. You want to make sure these are secured really well, because the whole quilt is hand stitched. It's all done by hand if you're doing it the traditional way. I guess I should clarify that. It's possible to make this whole quilt on a machine. I have no desire to do that. I like hand stitching, so I'm going to show you how I do it. Now, these corners here, again, they're like a little bit wonky maybe, but again, you can manipulate this fabric here to get the desired effect, and then press it down really good. And now to tie a knot here, I will take my needle up here, and let me see which one is right. Okay. And then I'll wrap this around the needle like 3 times and pull it, which makes a good knot. And then I will bury my thread in between these layers. See, now you have 2 layers here. So I'm going to run my needle in between the fabric there in those two layers. And then I can cut it. And that's your first finished block. Again, I would fiddle with these a little bit more and then press those really good. Okay, I already made this one, and you can see this one's, you know, better than this one is. So you have two of them, and now you want to start to join them together. So this is the top of the quilt here. This is the back, and this is the finished back of the quilt. This quilt gets no batting, and it has no backing to it. This is the back of the quilt. So this is the top. So now you're going to connect these together. And I'm just going to use my, the same stitch that I use for binding or for applique. It's the ladder stitch. So I'm going to bring my needle up here and start by connecting my two corners. And I'm going to make a knot here. Wrap my thread around twice and make a good knot. And now I can go take a little bite out of this one and then go directly straight across and take a little bite out of the next one, all the time staying in those two layers so that your seams will be invisible. And then back over towards me, I'll take a little bite and then go straight across and take another little bite. The other thing that I learned as a little tip doing these is this might be the only time that I would tell you don't use the best quality fabric. It's a lot of hand sewing, and because now your fabric is folded already several times, it becomes very difficult very quickly to just do a needle and thread with hand piecing. I also wouldn't choose, you know, the lowest, the poorest quality fabric for obvious reasons, but I just kind of want to caution you also, stay away from really high thread count fabrics. It sounds counterintuitive, but it's really difficult to work with those. Again, you see I'm just taking like a few stitches at a time, and I'm staying in between those layers of fabric. You'll see on the back here, my stitches, you can't see the stitches here on the back. So that's kind of how you want to join them together. It's easy to do. It just takes a really long time to do that, to make a whole quilt out of this. So if you ever see somebody has made a Cathedral Windows quilt completely by hand, I just want you to appreciate the amount of time, the amount of hours that went into making that quilt. They really are something special, just because of the dedication and perseverance that it takes to actually finish a quilt that size all by hand. Okay, so now I'll show you. I have 9 of these sewn together. This is how I'm choosing to work. You just do what is comfortable for you. This was working for me. So I have 9 of these squares sewn together. So now I'm ready for the fun part, which is adding the centers to it. But I want to point out that wherever the seams are here, that's where your colors are going. All of these fabrics on the front cover a seam. So if you look here at this darker one here, that's on this seam here. If you look over here at this blue one, that's on this seam here. So I think that helps to strengthen the quilt. And then when you have all these done, I've been busy making these. I just kind of start by making, just making these because these are small. They're easy to keep by my side. And then you're eventually going to get to a point where you want to start now joining these together, you know, to keep building the quilt bigger. So that's what I did with this one. I just added 2 of those 9 patches together, and I just did a hand stitch all along the seam here. And again, now because there's another seam, that means now I have more places to put some more blue patches. So every time you make a seam, you're going to get the opportunity to put more patches. If you look along here, there's partial ones here that are waiting to be joined. And I'll show you when you add another section to it, you'll be able to see clearly now. When you join these together, now you're going to be able to put another blue patch in here, in each one of these. If you choose to fill in the whole thing, there's so many different patterns and everything that you can make along here. But that's how the whole quilt is built. It's just built, you know, 1 square at a time. It's very slow, but I find it very enjoyable and I love the finished look. So I'll show you now. These are going to be 1.5 inch squares. And you can see I started with a 6 inch square for each one of these squares on the back. Fold it in half and then fold it in half again. And now I'm going to flip over the edges. And this is how I do mine. I start by bringing up my needle around here, and I'm between the 2 layers, so you can't see my needle on the back. And I don't want my needle to be right on this fold because that is going to be visible. So I have a knot there, and I'm going to leave the tail for now because the folds or the curves come from folding this over, because this is all a bias edge now, and that's how it can fold. And here is where your blocks were joined together. So I come up there, and the first thing I do now is I'm going to take a bite out of this fabric here, but very close to where my thread is coming out. And I'm going to come up right next to where my thread is coming up. So I actually am taking a bite out of both of those fabrics. I'm going to wait until it gets to a loop that's closer, and I'm going to take a stitch like that. I call that my little anchoring stitch. It kind of holds those very tightly together. And then I just continue working, as I showed you before, with my ladder stitch all along, and I'm just holding this here as I go with my thumb, and I'm taking very small stitches, and I only take a few, and I'm not worried about this tail yet. I'm going to hide this tail underneath here, and you can always reposition this as you go and take a few more stitches. I try to keep my stitches pretty close to each other because it's sewn by hand, and your hand stitches are not a locking stitch like a sewing machine is. You know, your sewing machine has the top thread and the bobbin thread, and they lock together as they stitch. And this does not do that, so I try to keep my stitches close. So again, I'm just going to keep this tail, you know, kind of out of the way until I work my way down to where I'm going to have to turn the corner. And now I'm getting close enough I can just snip that, and it's now underneath that fold, so it'll be fine. Now when I get down to this one, again, I'm in the middle of these two layers of fabric, just through the top layer. When I turn this corner now, I'm going to come up, this is going to be the next one here that gets turned under. But before I turn, I'm going to take my thread and I'm going to go through both of these layers like this. Not going to pull it tight, but now I'm turning, and now I can turn this over. And now my thread is coming out right on that fold where I want it to. And I'm going to go back in again through this one that I just turned under, but very close to where this thread is. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to come up through both of those. I'm going to wait until I have a loop here and go through the loop. Just for that one anchoring stitch. I feel like it makes it a little bit stronger. And then again, I'll just continue the same as before. And I do that at all of the corners that I go through. So let me finish that up and I'll come back and show you when it's done. Okay, I'm back at the beginning here. I have the last few stitches to take here. And so now to finish this off, I'm on this side here at the very top. I'm going to go over to this one where my thread comes out up here. And I'm going to grab both of these pieces with my needle. And again, I'm going to wrap this thread around my needle twice. And that does give me a knot. And then I also make another knot, one that's going to get buried. So I'll wrap it twice. I get my loop and then I put my needle in it and stick it in the fabric, and then I can take it out. Now I have a knot very close to the bottom, and I'm going to now take my needle and I'm going to go in between these layers here. And I do that so that now I also have a tail, so when I cut my string or my thread here, I'm not cutting right next to the knot because I know the knot is probably buried like somewhere up here. So I don't have to cut right next to the knot. And that's basically it. It's pretty simple to do. Again, you just need a lot of time and a lot of patience to do it. So now that I showed you how to do it, let's go look at some of the quilts that Pam and I made. Welcome to our Cathedral Windows quilt show. I have 6 Cathedral Windows to show you. 3 of them I made and 3 of them Pam made. So the first one here is the biggest one, and I made this one when I was when I chose the colors for it. I was just kind of thinking like maybe tropical Caribbean, kind of deep blues, some greens, and I threw some purples in there too. So this, yeah, this is like a year's worth of work, of like steady work. Okay, so the next one here, I made this one also, and this is all in browns, and as you can see, it's not as big, and this one has been used hard. It's been washed. It's sort of has places where there have been some repairs made. It's a very heavy quilt. And because it's all sewn by hand, some of those stitches can give out with wear over time. But because now you know how to make one and you know how to hand stitch, you know how to repair them already. You understand the construction of it, so you know what needs to be done. And so this one has been repaired already. but it's still got a lot of life left in it. And so, yeah, so this is the second one that I made. And this one Pam made. This is mostly purples. It's so pretty. This one looks in perfect condition. Maybe there's a little bit of chocolate on it. You never know. So pretty though. And now this one is the very first Cathedral Windows quilt I ever made. So this was a learning experience, and I was making them just in blocks. And as I joined those blocks together, I did not choose to put more colored squares where those seams came together. So it does give it a different look. I still really like this though. And I use all my quilts too. This has been used, this has been washed. Okay, next on the list is one that Pam made. She chose a little bit darker background of muslin to start with, and the squares are mostly like greens, yellows, browns. I don't know how many of the squares are in each one of the quilts. I didn't count. But now hers are smaller. So I think she started with a smaller square. That's the other thing too. The book recommends starting with a 6-inch square, but you can start with any size square that you want as long as the entire quilt is made with that same size square. Everything will work out. Now your center little piece of colored fabric, the size of that is going to change if you change the size of the square that you originally start with. And here's the very last one. Pam made this one too. It's so pretty. And on this one too, if you notice, it looks like only the red part is pieced, but that's not true because each of these plain colored squares here also has a piece of fabric in it with the edges turned under and sewn on there too, so that you continue to get this circular effect. She just used the same fabric as the background fabric, but each one of these also has a piece of fabric in that had to be hand stitched and hand sewn into it. So it's kind of deceptive, but there's a lot of work in this, a lot. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed our Cathedral Window show. And one last thing before I go for this episode, I have a finish. This is the Scrappy Trip Around the World one that I started last summer, actually, when I was house sitting. So it finally reached the finish stage. This is the layout that I chose with the diamond as an offset diamond up here in the corner, and then just kind of radiating around that. This was pretty easy to quilt. This one has polyester batting in it, and I'll share the back of it with you. I used an old sheet for the back of it, which I thought this really should be on a quilt because of this pattern. And because this was a sheet, I saw there was a really little tiny tear in it up here, and so I put a patch on it. So I thought may as well put something cute on, so I just kind of appliqued a patch over that one. And it does have a pieced backing on it. Nothing special, nothing fancy. This is just a piece that had been gifted to me a couple of years ago. And, you know, it's like one of those 90s prints. It has a lot of quilt block motifs on it. You know, Ohio stars, churn dashes, Dresden plates, basket blocks. So that's it for the back. So that's it for the finish this week. And as usual, I want to thank everybody very much for joining me in my sewing room on my adventures. I'll see you next time. Bye.